Welcome to True and Unpolished with Lydia Singleton and Mary Howe. Our intention is to uplift and inspire you to create more of a life you'll love by sharing our always true and often unpolished conversations. Let's get authentic, everybody. Urban Dictionary says that ghosting is when a person cuts off all communication with their friends or the person they're dating with zero warning or notice beforehand. Now, Mary and I do not start out today to have a conversation about ghosting, but the topic leads us right to it. And maybe I'm a little slow, but it seems to me that every instance of ghosting can be traced back to this one thing that we aren't doing. Take a listen. All right. I've got cards. I know we talk a lot about cards, different cards here, but these cards are made by Esther Perel. And Esther Perel is a therapist, and now she's done a whole lot of things. She's got two really, really popular TED Talks. The first one is The Secret to Desire in Long-Term Relationships. And I got to say, I have given that link to I don't even know how many people, countless people. It is a really, really good thing to listen to if you are a person in a long-term relationship. And so it's a TED Talk. All you have to do is Google it. And Esther also has a podcast, Where Should We Begin? And she counsels couples, with their permission on that podcast, and you get to kind of hear a little slice of couples therapy. And she came up with these cards. Where should we begin? And they are conversation starters. They are meant to allow you to have more emotional intimacy and connection. And I got these cards for my husband for Christmas. And before you roll your eyes, he was very excited. Like, this is totally up his alley. So we use these a lot. Like, we'll say, hey, you want to do the cards tonight? And when I say cards, I mean, we only have the emotional bandwidth to do one at most. After we do one, we're like, done. So Mary and I are going to play today.
Woohoo.
Where should we begin, Mary? Where should we begin?
Well, it's funny that we're doing this because whenever you were reading through them, so she read a card and then read another card and then read another card, ...
We were trying to decide what we want, which card we wanted to use today in the conversation. So I was reading out some choices.
There weren't very many. This is telling, I think. There weren't very many cards that I was like, yes, I'd really like to talk about that right now.
That's right.
I don't know what that says about me, but
should I read the ones that we didn't choose?
Yeah, you could read a couple.
So here are a few that went on the scrap heap, guys, and we will not be talking about today. My views about love changed when ... The hardest lesson I've learned about love ... The part of my parents I'm most afraid of becoming is ... And Mary said too late. So those are some of the ones that we didn't choose today. The one I was going to do is a conversation I've been meaning to have. You may or may not have guessed this about me, but I am very involved in my children's lives. And particularly, well, not particularly, I'm involved in my children's lives, period. And because my youngest, has special needs and has what's called an IEP, and that means individualized education plan. So in other words, something specific, tailor-made to him, like goals that he can reach because he is not on the level of his same age peers. So because of that, I'm involved with the school, with the teachers all the time anyway, because we have to have an IEP meeting each year and talk about where he is and where he's going. But even more than that, I, wanted to see how both kids were doing. I would volunteer in class and see what's going on. And, with my youngest being who he is, he's not going to tell me what's going on at school. He's not, like, that's just not it. Um, and so I know that if I want to know, I'm going to have to be involved in certain ways.
There's conversations you're going to have.
Yes. And I've had a really great relationship with all the teachers and the principal in particular. They know me, and I've interacted with them a bunch of times. And anytime I've been worried about something, I've reached out to the principal at their school. Well, there last year, there was some testing going on, and it's testing they do every year. But this particular year, I guess because of the grades my kids were in, it was really, really intense. And like they were very nervous. Like, my oldest son was like, Mom, it is a big deal, and they were stressed. And my youngest son started sleepwalking all the time, which is an indication that he's stressed. And he was saying things. He literally said, I'm so dumb, I shouldn't be alive. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I, of course, called the school and trying to figure out what in the world would make him think this way. And it was this testing. Well, the testing is really benchmarks for the teachers. It's about, they're actually testing the teachers by way of testing the students. And I, fundamentally kind of disagree with the intensity with which they do these tests. And they were doing them back to back to back to back to back. And I was really upset because when my youngest came home and said, I'm so dumb, I shouldn't be alive. And when I realized it was because of this testing, and I was on, the parents' message board, right? And one of the parents said, look at what they did at this other school. And this other school, like, they sent out this letter and asked the parents to read it with the kid, and the principal read it to the kids. And it said, essentially, you're going to take this test, and this test does not say anything about you. It doesn't say if you're smart or if you're not. It doesn't say if you're good or bad. It doesn't say anything about you. This is just about trying to figure out where we can teach you more. And the letter was so well done. And I thought, why didn't they do this at our school? Like, what? And I was in reactive mode because my son had said what he said. And so I posted on the message board and was like, this is what should have been done. Like, I give the example of the letter, I show the letter, and why didn't they do it this way, and blah, 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 blah. Well, so I have a relationship with these teachers and with the principal at the school. And the principal got upset with me. And I could tell because everything changed. Like the relationship changed. And I went, oh, and I realized very soon after, but this was toward the end of the school year. I realized very soon after why he would be upset. And the reason why is because he has always said to me, I can't change, I can't fix anything you don't tell me about. And so his big thing is just tell me what's going on and we'll address it. And that's always been what I've done. Like there was a bully situation, not with my kids, but I watched this bully other kids every day when I went to pick up my son. And I called my principal and was like, okay, this is happening every day. So, and he responded. And he had always been very receptive to me. Mm-hmm. So I'd done that and I could tell he was upset. And I knew that I needed to say I was sorry. I needed to say, you know what? You have always invited me to talk to you if something's bothering me. And I did this thing. But then it was the end of school and it was summertime. And my husband would go, have you reached out to him yet? And I'd go, no, you really need to do that. I know.
So this is the conversation you still need to have?
Yes. And that was last year.
So what's holding you back?
I don't know. It was, it kind of is one of those things where it's like, well, so much time has passed.
How's the relationship?
Well, it had been still very, very cold until a couple of weeks ago. He came out of his office for the first time when I was in the office doing an early pickup and talked to me. That was the first time. And listen, we've had IEP meetings and he has to be there and he has said nothing. He went from like talking nonstop at the IEP meetings to saying zip, nil, nada.
Hmm.
So he did a couple of weeks ago. But then, y'all, one of my neighbors reached out to me because her son, they are thinking that her son is autistic and she had no idea. And she's having to go pick him up all the time from school. And he goes obviously to the same elementary school because she's a neighbor. And I said, listen, I will be happy to come up with to the school with you, or I can just tell you the things that I think you need to talk to the school about, because she's like, I can't keep doing this. I'm picking him up at least twice a week. In fact, she just texted a little bit ago and said she picked him up again. She said, I'd really like for you to come. And I said, okay, but don't tell the principal that I'm coming with you, because I would rather like be there so he'd know that I'm not like trying to interfere or butt in. I'd like to explain why I'm there, and I think it would go over better. But I think she did tell him that I was coming, because she said that he called her and they had a conversation, and, she felt like things were going to change. And then, of course, today she texted and said, nothing's changed. I had to go pick him up again. So he had been open to me, but now I think he's closed again. So that's the conversation. But y'all, I am famous for not having conversations that I need to have. Like I have a habit of not habit. I have a pattern of ghosting people. Like before ghosting was like a term, like had a PhD in it. And I was talking to my therapist about this, and this is different, but I don't know. You tell me, Mayor. I was talking to my therapist about it, and I said, why do I do this? Why do I have this thing where, these people who really love me and who I have, I'm close-ish with, I'll move somewhere and ghost them or something, I'll ghost. And
She ghosted me, y'all.
I did. But you know what though? That was a different ghost. I did. And it wasn't for this reason. It wasn't for the reason that my therapist pointed out. She pointed out that the reason why I ghost people and why I can do it is because these people love and care about me and feel close to me because they've shared themselves with me. I don't feel close to them because I didn't share myself with them. I didn't share my inner life. And that is like dead right,
Yeah.
dead right.
So I have a pattern of making people ghost me, I think.
No. Why do you say that?
Well, part of it is people just come and go.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a part of life.
Right.
Most of us don't have a relationship that lasts from birth to death.
Right.
We might have siblings and parents that are long-term relationships, even, a close friend or something. But for the most part, we don't have a relationship that exists throughout every moment of our life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think obviously that is something to consider, but it seems like that ghosting happens a lot with me, or people do that to me. It's like your conversation that you haven't had with the principal. Maybe I'm pretty direct and honest in my assessment sometimes. A lot of times people appreciate it, but a lot of times people don't appreciate it. And so it may go along with that.
Yeah.
And I've learned how to censor myself. When I was younger, I did not have much of a filter.
Yeah. I think that one of the reasons why you think that might be the case is because you have always been so good at connecting with people and creating a relationship right away, and you are just really, really good at friendships. I think you are stellar at friendships.
Thank you.
I think because the nature of life is what you say, and that is that people come and go, I think that you would be a stayer. You know what I mean? I think that if people will accept the gift that is you, you'll stay. Like they have to be the one that leaves the room because you don't have a reason to,
That's true.
Yeah.
We teach people how to treat us.
Right.
Sometimes I wonder what I'm doing to teach people, ghost me.
I don't know. Well, I'm not you, but I just don't see that about you. I don't see that people ghost you. But I'm not you.
Well, there's another piece is I only have so much attention to give. And so maybe that's part of it too. When I'm in front of somebody, I'm very often am present with them, but when they're not there, I'm not present with them. And I think that's also the nature of relationships.
Yes. And I'm the same way. I'm exactly the same way. If you're in front of me, I'm going to give my presence to you, the foundation of what we believe, which is we are here to be present with what's in front of us and to show up as love with what life brings to us. So when that person isn't in front of us, they're not in front of us. So I think a little bit of my ghosting people is that too, because often it happens when I move. But you know what I was thinking when you were talking? It's a little bit like, how we're all walking around dying, but we don't talk about it. I think that's true about the friendship thing. It's like we are friends with somebody, we meet them, and we don't go, hey, we know the nature of friendships is that they don't, we don't necessarily, statistically speaking, we're not going to last, like it doesn't,
Yeah.
that doesn't make a great relationship. So we don't say from the outset, like, I get that you're probably not going to be here in 20 years, So it's kind of like,
see, that is something I would say.
I think
in
it's
a relationship. That's maybe the part of the problem. I mean, the honesty, it doesn't always have to be so blunt. What do you mean we're always dying or something?
It's because we are all dying right now. Like we're going to die, but we live like that's not true. We live like there isn't this death thing that's coming. Because if we talked about that, if we said, oh, I love you too, my sweet little angel child, and I'm dying, I'm statistically speaking, I'm going to die before you. You are going to live through my death. You're going to have to plan the funeral. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we don't say that shit. And we shouldn't, right? Like, how could we play at this game called life?
How would life be different if we did talk about it more openly like that? I think that in our culture, it is so, it's not just something we don't talk about, it's something we avoid at all costs.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So, obviously nobody is, most people probably are not ready to die, don't want to die, but it is a part of everybody's experience. That's something, 100% will happen.
So when I was serving a spiritual community, one of the talks I gave was give death a chair, like pull up a chair, an empty chair, and invite death to sit there and have a conversation with death. Like, what are you here to teach me? And so even if we hide it from each other, let's not hide it from ourselves. That is, they say that everybody's core fear at the bottom is non-existence. So I think that, more important than talking about it with each other is talking about it with ourselves.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we've talked about the conversation that we've been meaning to have.
We've talked about death.
We've talked about death.
We've talked about relationships. Well, I want to talk about intimacy.
Okay.
So when we started this discussion, what I said was there were so many of these things that I didn't want to talk about.
Yeah. So many of the cards I read you that you just said, I don't want to go there.
Right. And then you brought up the conversation that you have been meaning to have for going on close to a year.
Yeah.
That you've been avoiding. So
Yeah.
wonder, I mean, I think intimacy is challenging. And I wonder if what is more challenging? Is it sexual intimacy or emotional intimacy?
Oh, emotional intimacy, hands down, absolutely, 100%. Absolutely. I mean, for me, I didn't even realize the degree to which I was avoidant to emotional intimacy until really a couple weeks ago in couples therapy with my husband, where we were breaking down this moment. The therapist had us
Mhm.
break down this one like sliver of a moment in the interaction between us. And she had us go through like what was going on in our minds during that time. And we each kind of deconstructed the moment by breaking it
Mhm.
down. What was I thinking here and here and here and here? So it's essentially sharing your inner life with your partner. So I'm sharing my inner life, and I say something that is very common in my inner life, very common in my inner dialogue. And my husband, I've never seen a more shocked look on his face, because he said, I would have never in a million years guessed that that was a thought that ever entered your mind. And, we've been married 12 years. It's almost 12 years. Emotional intimacy, let's define it. That is sharing your inner life with another person, right?
Yeah. I think authentically sharing your inner life,
Right.
because you can share on a surface level or you can
Yes.
share on a deeper level. And it's dependent on the relationship, the sort of the security of the relationship, the trust in the relationship,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
how deeply intimate will we can go emotionally.
So these cards, as I said, she created them because she wanted them to foster emotional intimacy between people. And these cards, they have different levels of cards, so different levels of depth. And
Intimacy and depth. Yeah.
mhm. And like she even suggests talking, doing it with work colleagues. Like there's a okay for work kind of conversations, which in part are some of the cards that I read to Mayor. And we did it, my husband and I did, with his dad and stepmom. They came over for dinner one night and we were explaining the cards, and they were like, let's do one, And so we brought them down and we all had this conversation, and it was like, really, it was great. And so maybe if we did more of that with people, there would be less ghosting and people would stay around longer.
Well, I was thinking about the creating more intimacy. How do we do that?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, just talking about things that are uncomfortable to talk about. And what I was thinking about is one of the skills that I teach is opposite to emotion action. And the way that skill works is very simple. You do the thing that you are afraid of. I mean, if fear is the emotion, then you do the thing that you're afraid of. So
Mm-hmm.
you have the conversation with the principal.
Mm-hmm. I have to say
And
that it's more comfortable for me to think about, because I was like, well, yeah, but what? I need to know the why. Why do I not want to have the conversation? But I recognize that that's my avoidance. Like I'll play in my mental playground all day long. And
yeah,
the reality is what you're talking about, the skill that you're talking about is just do it. Don't like
yes.
maybe the why comes after.
An example is if you are at a school dance, you're at the school dance and you really want to, be a part of the school dance, then acting 100% is actually not standing on the wall
Mm-hmm.
watching the people dancing, but to get out on the dance floor and dance.
Mm-hmm.
And to take it a step further, you're not censoring yourself on the dance floor. You're not saying, oh, I shouldn't be here. You're not saying, I wonder what other people are thinking about me. 100% me, body, mind, spirit.
Yeah.
So doing that thing, and the way that your fear or anxiety reduces is actually doing it over and over again. So the more you have those difficult, intimate conversations, the easier it gets.
Sure. And what's crazy is the thing with the principal is not really an emotional conversation. And I don't have any problem saying, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Like I'm totally good with saying that. I say it often. So
Right.
not that.
Well, I think the longer we avoid something, the more fear comes from it, whatever it is. I mean, this is just an example of what we all do. I mean, we all have things that we avoid. And so opposite to emotion is approach rather than avoid.
Okay, so tell me this. How do I have the conversation? Do I call him? Do I write him an email? Do I go up to the school? Like, what do I do? Tell me. What's the best way to do it?
Well, what does your gut tell you?
My gut says that I should do it in person, but I also
don't want to.
Yeah. I want it to come up organically, but it really can't. Like it has to be.
Well, it was going to come up organically that day that he came out of his office and he was open to you. Yeah. That was the moment.
Yeah, but I had my little nephew, my kindergarten nephew, and my son was on his way out. I was picking him up because it was his birthday, and there were people there,
yeah. Well, I think you can just be open to being open. But what you have done is overthought it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what we do with fear, so it becomes monstrous because we are avoiding. And so the more we avoid, the bigger it gets. Yeah. And so even if it's, imperfect,
right,
even just doing it is the key.
Right. Like, don't worry about it being the right way or the best way. It's just do it. And I'll tell you, the window for this is fast closing because my youngest son, he's leaving the school after this year. So I've known them, been there for 6 years because we started with my son and my oldest son in kindergarten, and then my younger followed. So I'm about to not be a parent at that school anymore.
Yeah.
So I got to do it.
Why do you have to do it?
Because it's the thing that honors who I am, and it honors the relationship that we've had.
Right. And I think, one of the things that we've talked about a lot is telling a new story. Yeah. So the ghosting thing, if I tell this new story, then this, approaching this situation is part of the new story. Avoiding is my old story.
Yeah, right. Okay. So then I'll keep y'all posted and let you know how it goes, because I know that you guys just on the edge of your seats wondering how this is going to pan out between Lydia and the principal. Well, thank you for having some emotional intimacy with me today, Mare.
Sure thing.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. And please remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And we've got our Facebook group. It's a private group so that people can share and not have the whole world see it.
We'd love to hear your true and unpolished stories in that group as well.
Yes. If you want to answer the question, what is the conversation you've been avoiding? We can give you some feedback. So hop on that message board, everybody. Is message board a thing? Is that a thing? I think that was back when it was like AOL and like dial-up internet. So scratch that. Hop on that Facebook group, everybody. And you have been listening to Truth and Unpolished, the podcast. Let's see what happens next.